Republicans finalized their sweeping tax package, expanding the child tax credit to win the support of Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Now, it seems that they have brought back the potential holdout, and they say there are no more obstacles to the passage of the bill. The hope is to send the bill to President Trump and hand him his first major legislative victory. Members of the House Senate Conference Committee signed the final version of the legislation today, sending it to the House and Senate for final passage. So what does all this mean for you? It's very technical. So joining us now to discuss this is Mattie Duppler. She's a senior fellow at the National Taxpayers Union and a former director of budget and regulatory policy at Americans for Tax Reform. Mattie, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Mattie, we have President Trump saying his tax plan will pass as early as next week. He's been very vocal about it wanting to happen. So, Nick Mulvaney, White House budget director, that is saying he should expect a vote in the Senate on Tuesday, House on Wednesday. Is that wishful thinking on the part of the White House? I mean, how soon will this be done?
You know, I remain an eternal optimist on tax reform, and I think that's actually going to be borne out by the facts starting next week. Any minute now, we are expected to see the final text of the conference report, as you mentioned earlier. Yeah. The conferees signed off on it earlier this afternoon, and that means that the House and the Senate can move forward with their vote starting next week, and the president can sign that before Christmas. As you mentioned, there were a number of questions that were raised during the conference committee that needed to be ironed out by the conferees. But that seems to be all behind us now, and really all that's left to do is take it down to the floor for a vote.
Well, Mattie, there are a couple of things that trouble me about this, and one of them is driven by the fact that I live in New Jersey. I pay a tremendous amount of money in property taxes, state income taxes, and the like. And one of the things that doesn't appear to have happened is that they are not going to let me continue to deduct those taxes from my tax return. I, in essence, am going, I and others like me in states like New York, New Jersey, California, are going to be taxed twice. Lots of folks, lots of economists start laughing. Steve Boer among them, who laughed at me and said, "Well, you need to move, Bill." That ain't going to happen.
That's one suggestion, but I actually think that you will be quite pleased with the outcomes of the bill, because there are actually provisions built into the legislation that would allow taxpayers like yourself living in New Jersey, New York, California to still be able to deduct some of those taxes. The provision that was worked out will likely be a $10,000 cap on those taxes that you can deduct, but it will be property taxes in addition to choosing between income and sales tax. So in addition to maybe considering going to a lower tax jurisdiction, maybe a tax with no income states at all, the federal tax treatment of your state and local taxes will still remain accessible, and you'll still be able to deduct some of those.
Yeah, but let's just, I don't want to take over the interview, but let's just put some numbers on this, okay? Because my property taxes are well over $10,000. I'm not unusual. New Jersey is hideous in terms of the property taxes that people pay. I know people that pay twice as much as I do. $10,000 doesn't even come close to covering my property taxes, let alone anything else.
And frankly, that's an argument for having better fiscal policy at the state.
Well, yes, it is. I totally agree.
Property taxes getting zeroed out, right? But I'm from Wisconsin, where Governor Scott Walker zeroed out property taxes for people who have that liability in a lot of cases. So, you know, this I think will be one step in many taken not only at the federal level to have better tax policy, but hopefully will provoke more serious discussions at the state and local level. You know, in New Jersey, there were already reports of politicians there getting a little nervous about tax hikes they had actually thought about signing into law in this coming year. And they expressed the fact their hesitation came from the federal conversation on state taxes, knowing that once you get rid of some of the ability to inoculate politicians from bad tax decisions in the states, that there's going to be additional pressure on them, that they'll have to ask some serious questions of themselves whether they're willing to continue to place those burdens on taxpayers like you.
Well, it's going to be interesting because, and there was a good article in Variety, and if you haven't read it, it was a good one to read because it focuses on the entertainment industry and independent contractors. And one of the things that the concern in the entertainment industry is that the deductions by independent contractors are going to be severely limited. Now, you're right, we should see soon the final bill, but that is of great deal of concern for a lot of other people because they have expenses that they traditionally deduct, like agents' fees,
Sure.
Equipment fees in terms of things they buy in order to be able to do their job. What are you hearing about that? And do you know how Congress is going to handle that?
Well, there's a lot of ink that's been spilled on what's coming out of the tax code, those deductions and credits that people are familiar with taking. But that ignores the fact that only 30% of this country itemizes and uses a lot of those credits and deductions. So 70% of the country right now isn't even itemizing. They're taking the standard deduction. And so what this bill will do will double that standard deduction. So obviously, if you're someone who's already in that pool where you're not itemizing, you're seeing a generous bump up in the deduction you're already taking. And in fact, the number of people who will take the standard deduction will expand immensely. Probably 9 in 10 taxpayers will be taking the standard deduction rather than itemizing. So that has the added benefit of increasing simplicity in the tax code. And in particular on the individual side, I don't think that anyone would argue the ideal situation for taxpayers is to be taking care to keep all their receipts for the entire year and then calculate what that deduction will be and which credit they get where. Increasing simplicity and making taxpayers, making more relief available to taxpayers more easily is going to be an added benefit to this bill as well.
So I just wanted to ask you this. We obviously know Bill working in this industry. Agents were not happy about the deduction we were just talking about, and they said this is because Trump hates Hollywood. How much truth is there to that statement? I thought you might have fun with that one.
That's an interesting argument, but I think a better argument for this tax bill is that it's a leveling of the playing field. Agents, people working in any industry will probably have a reason that they want to protect their favored tax issue in the tax code. There's a saying that I heard from an economist earlier: if you need a tax credit to survive, you're not running a business, you're running a tax shelter. And that's essentially what the case is here. We've got too many businesses that rely on special deductions and credits in the code to have a profitable business. What I would prefer to see, and what will be more productive for every job creator in this country, is to have a lower, flatter code that doesn't require business owners to make all those extraneous calculations to figure out what their tax liability is going to be. I would much rather have a code where business owners know at the beginning of the year what their liability will be and be able to plan accordingly. And under this plan, there are a lot of people, in fact, probably at every level of income, who will see tax relief because of the simplicity, because of the decreasing in the obscurity in the code, and increasing relief as a result.
Well, here's a $64,000 question for you then. Why wasn't there a flat tax? The Republicans were in control. Theoretically, if they wanted to do it, they could do it, Mattie. Why didn't they just give us a flat tax?
If you're someone who's a flat tax advocate, I would argue that you should be supporting this bill because it's a necessary step towards making taxes flatter and simpler. Listen, we're going from a tax code that is pretty much absolutely garbage, right? Like, we can all agree that there's a lot of stuff in the tax code right now that really only serves to enrich a limited few and has really made a lot of barriers to growth in this country. So getting rid and clearing out a lot of that is going to take time. I, of course, always argue for more tax relief rather than less, more simplicity rather than less. But I think right now getting this tax package passed will be a major win and really puts wind in the sails of people who want to continue to reform the code and issue even more tax relief for American taxpayers.
Mattie, just real quick before we go to break, what were your thoughts on Marco Rubio? He wanted to protect middle-class families more. What's your thought on that?
Sure. I think that Senator Rubio was taking an opportunity to take a stand on something that's important to him. Expanding the child tax credit and increasing refundability of that credit, I think, is a very important conversation to have in terms of what ideal tax policy is for families. And I'm excited to see that we've actually found a resolution on that issue and that he can support the package because, as I said, there's still more work to be done even after we pass this bill.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mattie. That was fabulous insight. And coming up, a very special birthday wish, and we'll have some more updates for you.